My ex humiliated me in court, but when I revealed the truth, nobody expected what happened next. Helena had always been a quiet woman, the kind who preferred the hum of routine over the chaos of confrontation. She lived in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, working long hours as a nurse at the local clinic, tending to patients with a kind smile and gentle hands. Her world was small but steady, her days measured by shifts, late-night coffees, and the occasional phone call from concerned friends who asked if she was okay after the divorce. She didn't talk much about her past, and those who knew her perhaps underestimated her strength. Beneath the soft-spoken exterior was a woman quietly holding pieces of a shattered life, fragments she hoped to someday mend. The story that had been quietly eating away at her began years ago, in the sunlit rooms of a once shared home, now echoing with silence. She had been married to David, a man whose charm concealed sharp edges, an influential attorney with a reputation that gleamed as brightly as his tailored suits. But behind closed doors, the man was cold, controlling, and quick to cast blame at Helena for every imperfection in their marriage. The separation, eventually, was a relief, but also the beginning of a new kind of torment. David wasn't content to quietly walk away. His bitterness simmered into a need to control the narrative, to rewrite the story in his favor. When the court date finally arrived to settle the contentious custody and property disputes, Helena felt the weight of years pressing down on her chest. She entered the courtroom dressed plainly, devoid of the sharpness David often wielded like a weapon. The room was a grand hall of marble and heavy oak, where her humble presence seemed almost out of place. David's side was filled with high-profile lawyers, papers neatly stacked, confident looks spread across their faces. The judge sat elevated, a symbol of impartiality that Helena prayed would hold true. But as the proceedings began, it became painfully clear her presence there was not to be seen as equal. David wasted no time. With a smile that was more sneer than warmth, he began his attack, painting Helena as an irresponsible woman, unstable and incapable of caring for their child. His words were sharp knives, twisting facts and plunging into Helen's past mistakes. The courtroom watched in silence as he recounted instances of supposed neglect, exaggerating minor incidents into evidence of incompetence. Helena could feel the sting as whispers circled amongst the gallery, her reputation unraveling before her very eyes. The judge's mild glances and the lawyer's smirks only deepened her feeling of isolation. She struggled to find a voice, but every statement she tried to make was drowned by David's dominance. Even those who came to support her, family members, old friends, seemed overwhelmed by David's forceful presence. Helena was trapped in a narrative that wasn't hers, humiliated in a public forum where private pain becomes fodder for judgment. She bit her lip, threatening tears but determined to stay composed. The room felt heavy, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken biases. She could see the dismissal in the eyes of those around her, the assumptions being made based on David's polished performance rather than any truth she could offer. Despite this, a flicker of defiance sparked within Helena's chest. She knew she had to withstand this storm, to hold on to something that wouldn't shatter under the weight of lies. But how could she fight when the world had already decided her fate? As the day wore on, the relentless pressure began to wear down her spirit, and yet a quiet resolve built beneath the surface. This would not be the end of her story. The courtroom's sterile walls echoed with accusations, but Helena's mind raced, forming a plan, clutching something long hidden, something that could finally turn the tide. In that moment of near defeat, she pondered the question that had haunted her since the proceedings began: how much more humiliation could she bear before she stood up for herself, truly and with no reservation? It was a question without an easy answer, but it was the spark that ignited her courage. She knew the path ahead was fraught with pain and uncertainty. Yet beneath the humiliation, beneath the public dissection of her life, was a woman ready to reclaim her truth. And so, as the court recess was called, and murmurs filled the room, Helena slipped silently into a corner, clutching the folder that contained the proof she'd kept hidden all these years. It was time for the truth to come out, the truth that would change everything. But would the court, or any of the people watching, Be willing to listen to a woman who had been crushed beneath the weight of public scorn? She could only hope. For now, the first battle had been fought, but the war had just begun. It was a moment ripe with tension, hanging between despair and unexpected hope. Have you ever faced a moment where your whole world seemed to crumble in front of others, only to realize that the most powerful truths were still hidden just beneath the surface? What would you do if you held the key to your redemption in your hands, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it? Sometimes, the greatest victories begin in the quietest moments of strength we find within ourselves. The afternoon light filtered through the tall courtroom windows, casting long shadows that seemed to mimic the weight pressing down on Helena's shoulders. As the proceedings resumed, a sense of quiet tension settled over the room, like calm before a storm. Helena sat stiffly in her seat, her fingers still trembling slightly as she reached for the folder she had hidden beneath her coat. It contained years of silenced documents, messages, and carefully kept records that chronicled the truth her ex-boyfriend had tried so hard to bury. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was her moment, but doubts flickered in the dark corners of her mind. Was she ready to confront the powerful man across the room? Could this fragile hope withstand the crossfire of legal battles and public scrutiny? David remained poised, his features the very picture of confidence, but Helena noticed a subtle twitch in his jaw when his lawyer mentioned the new evidence she threatened to unveil. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly in anticipation or perhaps in irritation. Helena's gaze briefly met his, the years of hurt, neglect, and silent suffering flashing between them. For a fleeting second, she almost saw who he had been before the mask of arrogance and control fully settled in his eyes. But the moment was gone as soon as it came. The merciless courtroom awaited her next move. Helena's lawyer gave her a small nod, a subtle encouragement she desperately needed. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she rose to her feet and walked to the center of the courtroom, clutching the folder tightly. She had spent months compiling every letter, email, and receipt that could dismantle the malicious story David had woven. Documents from business transactions exposing his fraudulent deals. Text messages where he twisted conversations and spread lies about her. Even evidence of financial manipulations that had once been hidden behind a polished exterior. Each piece a nail in the coffin of his constructed narrative. As she laid the papers on the judge's bench, a palpable silence fell over the room. Whispers swirled among the audience and lawyers alike, their faces shifting from smug confidence to surprise. The truth wasn't just a weapon, it was an unraveling nightmare for David. His lawyers shuffled uneasily, trying to contain the damage. The judge, usually impassive, leaned forward, scanning the documents with genuine interest. Helena's voice, though initially shaky, grew firmer as she explained the significance of her findings. She detailed how David's influence had allowed him to hide debts and falsify accounts, forcing her into situations where she was painted as negligent and unreliable. The courtroom could no longer ignore the story behind the facade, the truth cracking through the layers of deceit. Each revelation was a blow against the humiliation she had endured, a reclamation of her dignity piece by piece. Yet, amid this surge of courage, doubts still gnawed at her. Would this revelation be enough to overturn the tide? Would the court and the people watching finally see her for who she truly was, beyond the lies and whispers? The emotional toll was immense. Helena's body ached with the strain of carrying such secrets for so long, the loneliness that accompanied fighting a battle against someone so well-connected becoming painfully clear. Friends and family had warned her about exposing herself to such risks, but she had no choice. This was about more than a legal case, it was about facing the ghosts that had haunted her life. David, sensing the shift in momentum, struck back with sharp cross-examinations, attempting to discredit Helena's evidence and painting her as vindictive and manipulative. But the cracks in his armor were undeniable. His polished arguments faltered each time the newly revealed facts were brought to light. The courtroom became a chessboard where every move mattered, the stakes higher than ever. Helena's resolve hardened with every challenge. In that tense arena, she found an unexpected strength, one born not from power or influence but from unwavering truth and the desire for justice. If you found yourself standing in Helena's shoes, facing a world that doubted your every word, what would be the source of your courage? Would you have the will to expose painful truths, risking everything to reclaim your voice? Sometimes, it's in the fiercest battles that our true selves are awakened, a reminder that even in moments of despair, the human spirit can rise strong and unyielding. As the courtroom drama unfolded, it was clear Helena was no longer just a woman being humiliated, she was a warrior ready to rewrite her destiny. But with every step forward came greater risks, and the shadow of retaliation loomed ominously. The conflict was far from over, and the consequences of truth continued to escalate. The hours dragged on like an unforgiving storm, thick with tension and unspoken threats. Helena sat back down, the weight of every gaze pressing on her as reality hardened around her like a cage. The courtroom, which once seemed a distant arena of formal procedure, had become a battlefield where every word, every document, and every glance could mean the difference between disgrace and vindication. David's lawyers were relentless, launching wave after wave of objections, counterclaims, and attempts to undermine the authenticity of Helena's evidence. The judge, though fair, was visibly struggling to reconcile the mounting contradictions, the layers of deception beginning to unravel from both parties' lives. Helena's heart pounded, a volatile mix of hope and fear. For years, she had endured the psychological toll of silence imposed by power and fear. Now, that silence was being shattered, but at a cost greater than she had anticipated. The stress weighed on her like a physical burden, threatening to break her resolve. Yet within her, an ember of determination glowed fiercely. She reminded herself that this moment was not just about proving her innocence, it was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and most importantly, her child's future. Just as the courtroom seemed balanced on a knife's edge, an unexpected twist sent ripples through the assembled crowd. Helena's lawyer, after hours of painstaking presentation, revealed a sealed affidavit, new evidence that no one had anticipated. It was from a whistleblower, someone within David's inner circle, who had come forward anonymously. The affidavit detailed not only financial frauds but also more sinister manipulations, attempts by David to influence witnesses and judicial officials, methods to distort the truth well beyond what anyone had supposed. The room fell into stunned silence, even the seasoned judge paused, peering over his spectacles as he digested the bombshell. David's face, once a mask of arrogance, paled, his eyes betraying the panic beneath. The courtroom murmurs escalated, whispers of betrayal and scandal threading through the spectators. Lawyers scrambled to salvage their position, some casting wary glances towards their client. This revelation shifted the entire narrative, placing Helena not as the defendant of slander but as the brave truth-bearer stepping into the light of justice. The courtroom's atmosphere changed from one of judgment to anticipation. The balance of power, long held by David, wavered precariously. Witnesses who had been reticent began to speak, their voices emboldened by the exposure of deceit at the highest level. Slowly, Helena's story began to solidify as a testament to resilience, courage, and unwavering honesty. Each statement peeled back another layer of lies, exposing a web of manipulation that extended far beyond the personal sphere. Amid these developments, Helena found herself grappling with the intense personal fallout. David's attempts at smearing her reputation had publicly branded her as unstable. Now the world was watching closely, eager to see whether the underdog could claim victory or be crushed under the weight of the powerful man's wrath. The stress was relentless, manifesting in sleepless nights, moments where the burden seemed unbearable. Yet, when she looked at the folder containing the affidavit and other evidences, she drew renewed strength. The truth was on her side, and with it, the promise of a new dawn. David, desperate to regain control, attempted to challenge the whistleblower's credibility, launching a personal attack that bordered on desperation. He called for recesses, sought to file motions to dismiss the new evidence, hoping to stall the momentum. The courtroom observers watched this game of legal chess, some sympathizing silently with Helena's plight, others uncertain how far the consequences might spiral. The judge, maintaining poise, warned sternly against obstruction, signaling a shift in tone. In the midst of this chaos, Helena realized something profound. The very humiliation she had once suffered was transforming into a source of unimaginable power. The courtroom that had echoed with her disgrace was now a stage for her vindication, her voice rising louder with every revelation. It was a painful journey, but one she understood she had to walk to its end. What frightened her most was not the fight itself, but what might happen once the truth was fully unearthed. Have you ever faced a moment when revealing your most guarded secrets threatened to unleash unforeseen consequences? The kind of truth that promises liberation but also vulnerability? Helena was standing at that crossroads, knowing that the days ahead could alter lives irrevocably, not just hers, but those intertwined in this tangled web of deceit and ambition. As the courtroom awaited the final turn, one question hung heavily in the air: would justice prevail, or would the powerful find new ways to silence the truth? The impending conclusion loomed close, poised to unravel decades of lies and expose the strength of a woman who refused to be defined by humiliation. Helena's story was about to reach its crescendo, a moment where the fragile line between defeat and triumph blurred into a profound revelation. And when that moment arrived, no one would be prepared for what would happen next. The silence before the storm was deafening, but the promise of justice had never burned brighter. The courtroom had evolved into a battleground where every moment felt charged with unspoken tension. Helena remained steadfast, her resolve increasingly unwavering despite the assault on her character she had endured. The evidence she presented was meticulously compiled and irrefutable, yet David and his legal team countered with fervor, digging into every detail of her past to find weaknesses, eager to dismantle the truth she had painstakingly unwrapped. But the tide was shifting. The power dynamics, once so mercilessly skewed in David's favor, wavered under the weight of Helena's revelations. Time blurred as testimonies unfurled, layering the narrative with depth and complexity. Witnesses who initially buckled under pressure began to stand firm, emboldened by Helena's courage. Slowly, cracks appeared in David's carefully constructed facade. The subtle tremor in his usual composure did not go unnoticed. His confident smirk faded during cross-examinations, replaced by tight, controlled expressions that betrayed his increasing unease. Every question cornered him, and every answer seemed to erode the foundation of lies that had supported his cruelty. Silence fell heavy when Helena's lawyer produced an unexpected piece of evidence, a sealed affidavit from a former insider who had chosen to speak out. The revelations within were devastating, detailed accounts of deceptive financial dealings, witness tampering, and manipulative schemes that went beyond anything Helena had previously disclosed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, even seasoned legal professionals exchanged glances of shock. The judge's eyes narrowed, signaling a turning point that no one could deny. David's face drained of color as the affidavit was read aloud, his attempts to maintain dominance rapidly unraveling. He shifted in his seat, knees bouncing nervously beneath the polished wood of the counsel table. His legal team scrambled, whispering urgent counsel as they strategized damage control. But the momentum had irrevocably shifted. The spectators, journalists, and court officials who had once viewed Helena with skepticism now watched her with silent admiration. She was no longer the woman being humiliated, she was the force challenging a system built on deceit. Helena felt a surge of vindication swell within her chest, tempered by the exhaustion from years of endurance. Yet, beneath the adrenaline and fleeting triumph, a gnawing unease lingered. The stakes had never been higher, and the risks she faced extended far beyond the courtroom barriers. Retaliation, public scrutiny, and the toll on her mental health shadowed her every step. David's fall from grace, should it come to pass, promised to be a bitter and protracted battle, one that would test her resilience beyond what she had imagined. David, desperate to regain control, launched an unrelenting assault questioning the validity of the whistleblower's credibility. Accusations of fabricated evidence, motives for revenge, and legal technicalities filled the courtroom as his lawyers sought to discredit the affidavit at all costs. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation and tension, the judge forced to mediate between obstructive tactics and the pursuit of fairness. Helena realized the fight was no longer solely for justice, it was a war of wills, endurance, and moral fortitude. In quiet moments amidst the chaos, Helena's thoughts returned often to the question that haunted her: how would this all end? Would the truth she fiercely defended withstand the crucible of doubt and manipulation? Could she ever reclaim the peace that had been so violently torn from her life? These were questions she kept locked away, pushing through the daily grind with fierce determination. The woman sitting quietly just days before had transformed into someone stronger, someone unwilling to let humiliation define her. What choices would you make when faced with overwhelming opposition and the threat of ruin? Helena's story illuminates the darkest corners of the human spirit: despair met with courage, humiliation transformed into power. As the courtroom awaited the continued unfolding of this epic struggle, one reality remained painfully clear: no one involved would walk away unchanged. And just beyond the horizon cast by the courtroom lights, the moment of truth, the ultimate reckoning, loomed closer. Helena's fight was far from over, but in those charged, lingering moments, there was a quiet promise, a profound anticipation that the next chapter of her story would deliver a truth so powerful it could not be ignored. The silence before the storm was dense with possibility, and the world waited with bated breath.